Handcuffs bit into a teenager's wrists while two grinning officers mocked his tears, completely unaware they were digging their own professional graves. They thought they had cornered a helpless kid from the wrong side of town. They had no idea his father was the city's most ruthless federal judge. Neon signs from a dying strip mall cast long, distorted shadows across the wet asphalt of Route 42. Cohen Wells gripped the steering wheel of his hand-me-down Honda Civic, knuckles white, keeping his eyes locked on the speedometer. It was a Tuesday evening, a little past 11, and the 17-year-old was riding the high of a major victory. On the passenger seat rested a heavy brass trophy. First place, State Regional Debate Championship. He was exhausted, wearing a thrift store suit that was slightly too broad in the shoulders, but he couldn't stop smiling. He was 10 minutes away from home, mentally rehearsing how he would tell his father about the final round. Red and blue lights suddenly exploded in his rearview mirror, fracturing the quiet darkness. Cohen's heart dropped into his stomach. The smile vanished. He immediately eased off the accelerator, flicked on his turn signal, and pulled smoothly onto the gravel shoulder. He shifted the car into park, turned off the engine, rolled down his window, and placed both hands flat on the top of the steering wheel at 10 and 2. It was a drill his father had rehearsed with him 100 times. No sudden movements. Speak clearly. Survive the encounter. Two car doors slammed shut behind him. Heavy boots crunched against the gravel. Officer Talon Fisher approached the driver's side, his hand resting casually on the butt of his service weapon. Fisher was a 15-year veteran of the Oak Creek Police Department, a man whose thick neck and permanent scowl were well known in the city's poorer districts. Approaching the passenger side was Officer David Kinsley, a rookie barely out of the academy, eager to please and easily molded by his senior partner's aggressive tactics. Fisher shone a blinding maglite directly into Cohen's eyes. License, registration, and proof of insurance. Fisher barked, his voice dripping with unwarranted hostility. Yes, officer, Cohen said softly, squinting against the harsh glare. My wallet is in my right back pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. May I reach for them? Fisher scoffed, exchanging a look with Kinsley over the roof of the car. Listen to this one, Dave. Sounds like a textbook. Go ahead, boy. Nice and slow. Don't try anything stupid. Cohen carefully retrieved his documents and handed them out the window. Fisher snatched them, glancing at the name and the address. The address was in an affluent, gated community across town, a detail that seemed to instantly irritate the veteran officer. Cohen Wells, Fisher read aloud, mispronouncing the first name intentionally. You're a long way from home, Cohen. Whose car is this? Because a kid like you sure doesn't live in Whispering Pines. It's my car, sir. It's registered in my name. I'm coming back from a debate tournament at the university. Debate tournament, Fisher sneered. He leaned closer, invading Cohen's space, smelling of stale cigarette smoke and cheap peppermint gum. You look nervous, kid. You got anything in this vehicle I need to know about? Weapons? Drugs? No, officer. Absolutely not. Step out of the vehicle. Cohen froze. Officer, was I speeding? Why am I being asked to step out? I said step out of the vehicle, Fisher shouted, violently yanking the driver's side door open. Are you resisting, boy? Because I will pull you out by your cheap collar. I'm complying, sir, Cohen said quickly, unbuckling his seatbelt and stepping out into the cold night air. Hands on the hood. Spread 'em. Fisher shoved Cohen roughly against the cold metal of the Honda. Cohen bit his lip, forcing himself to stay silent, as Fisher kicked his legs apart, patting him down with aggressive, intrusive force. On the passenger side, Kinsley had opened the door and was tearing through Cohen's belongings. The rookie grabbed the debate trophy and tossed it carelessly onto the floorboards, pulling out Cohen's meticulously organized briefing binders and dumping the papers across the front seats. Find anything, Dave, Fisher called out, keeping a heavy forearm pressed against the back of Cohen's neck. Just a bunch of papers and school junk, Kinsley replied, sounding almost disappointed. Pop the trunk, Fisher ordered. He yanked Cohen backward by the shoulder and spun him around. Sit on the curb. Do not move. Cohen sat on the wet concrete, shivering in his thin suit jacket, watching helplessly as the two officers dismantled the interior of his car. They ripped the lining out of the trunk, tossed his spare tire onto the gravel, and dumped his backpack upside down. Textbooks, pens and highlighters scattered into the muddy puddles by the roadside. "This is completely illegal," Cohen murmured, unable to hold back the protest any longer. "You have no probable cause to search my vehicle." Fisher stopped, slowly turning around. He walked over and stood directly over the teenager. "What did you say to me, you little punk?" "I said, you don't have probable cause. I didn't commit a traffic violation." A cruel smile stretched across Fisher's face. He reached to his belt and unclipped his handcuffs. "Is that right? Well, Mr. Lawyer, I say, I smelled marijuana. I say you were swerving over the yellow line. And now, I say you're resisting a lawful order and acting belligerent." Before Cohen could process the threat, Fisher hauled him off the curb by his lapels. The officer spun him around, slamming him face first into the side of the cruiser. Metal bit into Cohen's wrists as the handcuffs were ratcheted down so tightly they cut off his circulation. "Officer Kinsley," Fisher barked, "read this piece of garbage his rights. We're taking him in for suspected DUI and resisting arrest." Kinsley hesitated for a fraction of a second, looking at the terrified, completely sober high school student. But the rookie quickly buried his conscience, clearing his throat and reciting the Miranda rights. Cohen closed his eyes, a single tear cutting through the dirt on his cheek. He didn't fight. He didn't yell. He just let the cold reality of the metal cuffs sink in, knowing that his survival depended entirely on his silence. The fluorescent lights of the Oak Creek precinct buzzed with a maddening, insect-like hum. The station smelled of bleach, stale sweat, and cheap, burnt coffee. Cohen was dragged through the double doors by his bicep, his wrists aching terribly, his suit jacket now torn at the shoulder seam. Desk Sergeant Reynolds barely looked up from his crossword puzzle as Fisher and Kinsley hauled the teenager to the booking counter. "What do we have here, Fisher?" Reynolds mumbled, chewing on the end of a blue pen. "Caught this one out on Route 42, Fisher bragged, shoving Cohen slightly so that he bumped against the high wooden counter. "Erratic driving. Smelled like a brewery, though I couldn't find the bottles. Got mouthy. Resisted arrest. Standard trash." Cohen stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He knew the playbook. Any display of anger, any attempt to defend his honor right now, would only result in additional charges or a beating in the holding cells where the cameras conveniently malfunctioned. "Empty your pockets, kid," Kinsley instructed, unlocking the cuffs. Cohen rubbed his raw, red wrists and silently complied. He placed his wallet, his car keys, and a pack of spearmint gum on the counter. Fisher snatched the wallet, flipping it open and pulling out Cohen's driver's license. "Still trying to figure out how a kid like you affords a zip code like this," Fisher taunted, waving the ID in Cohen's face. "Your mom scrubbing toilets for some rich folks over in Whispering Pines. Is that how you got the address?" "My mother passed away from cancer 5 years ago," Cohen said, his voice terrifyingly flat and devoid of emotion. Fisher laughed, a dry, barking sound. "Boo-hoo! Take off your shoelaces, your belt, and your tie. You're going in cell 4. "I am entitled to my phone call," Cohen stated, looking directly into Fisher's eyes. "You'll get your call when I feel like giving it to you," Fisher snapped, stepping forward to intimidate the teen. But Cohen didn't flinch. He just stood there, stripped of his belt and tie, holding on to a quiet, ironclad dignity that seemed to infuriate the older cop even more. "Give him the phone, Tom," Kinsley muttered, looking around nervously. "Let's just process the paperwork and get it over with." Fisher rolled his eyes, grabbed a heavy black receiver from the wall-mounted rotary phone, and shoved it at Cohen's chest. "Make it quick." "Go ahead. Call your daddy. Tell him you're a criminal." Cohen dialed a number from memory. He didn't dial a cell phone. He dialed a direct, restricted landline. Miles away, in the heart of the city's downtown judicial district, the Honorable Abram Wells was sitting in his cavernous, mahogany-paneled chambers. At 52 years old, Abram Wells was a towering figure in the legal world. Appointed to the federal bench a decade ago, he was famously known in the press as the Iron Gavel. He was brilliant, uncompromising, and absolutely terrifying to corrupt prosecutors and lazy defense attorneys alike. He had just finished presiding over a grueling, late-night emergency injunction regarding a civil rights dispute. Abram was exhausted. He was still wearing his heavy, black judicial robe, the silk rustling slightly as he reached for the glass of scotch on his desk. Before his fingers could touch the glass, the private, unlisted red phone on his desk rang. Only 3 people in the world had that number. Abram picked up the receiver instantly. Wells. "Dad?" Abram's blood ran cold. The voice was trembling, stripped of its usual confident cadence. "Cohen? Where are you? Are you all right?" "I'm at the Oak Creek precinct," Cohen said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Dad, they pulled me over. They tore the car apart. They threw me against the hood and arrested me. They're charging me with resisting arrest and suspected DUI. Abram stood up so fast his heavy leather chair slammed into the bookshelves behind him. "Did they hurt you?" "I'm okay. My wrists are cut up from the cuffs. They threw my debate trophy in the mud." Through the receiver, Abram could hear a voice laughing in the background. "Officer Fisher, tell Daddy to bring a blank check, kid. It's going to be a long night." A terrifying silence fell over Abram Wells, the kind of silence that preceded a hurricane. All the warmth of a loving father vanished, replaced instantly by the cold, calculating wrath of a federal judge whose life's work was dismantling systemic injustice. "Cohen," Abram said, his voice dangerously soft and perfectly level. "Do not say another word to them. Do not answer any questions. Do not sign anything. I am on my way." The line went dead. Abram didn't bother changing into his street clothes. He didn't grab his briefcase. He simply threw his heavy wool trench coat over his black judicial robes, snatched his car keys, and walked out of his chambers. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Back at the precinct, Cohen hung up the phone and handed it back to Fisher. "Well?" Fisher sneered, leaning against the booking counter with a smug grin. "Is Daddy coming to bail his little thug out, or was he too drunk to answer?" Cohen looked at the 2 officers, a strange, quiet calm settling over him. The fear was gone. "He's on his way," Cohen said quietly, walking himself over to the holding cell and sitting down on the metal bench. "And you should probably call your union representative." Fisher and Kinsley burst into laughter, high-fiving each other as they walked toward the break room for more coffee. They thought it was the funniest thing they had heard all night. They had absolutely no idea that the ticking clock on their careers had just reached its final hour. Tires of a heavy black Lincoln Town car squealed violently against the pavement, jumping the curb and parking diagonally across 3 designated police spots directly in front of the Oak Creek precinct. Abram Wells shoved the heavy car door open before the engine had even fully stopped humming. The freezing night wind whipped the unbuttoned edges of his wool trench coat, revealing the heavy black silk of his judicial robe underneath. He did not walk. He marched. His strides were long, purposeful, and practically vibrating with an icy, controlled rage that had commanded courtrooms for over a decade. Inside the precinct, Desk Sergeant Reynolds was still lazily filling in the Sunday crossword puzzle. The heavy double doors of the entrance did not just open, they flew violently apart, slamming against the plaster walls with a concussive boom that made Reynolds flinch and drop his blue pen. Abram stood in the doorway. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast severe, uncompromising shadows across his sharp jawline and piercing dark eyes. He took 3 deliberate steps into the room, unfastening his trench coat and shrugging it off his shoulders. He draped it effortlessly over the nearest wooden bench. Now, he stood entirely in his federal judge's robe, the dark fabric hanging with the gravity of the law itself. Reynolds stood up, suddenly highly aware of his untucked uniform shirt. "Excuse me, sir, you can't just barge in." "My name is Abram Wells," the judge interrupted, his voice a low, rumbling baritone that echoed off the linoleum floors. It wasn't a shout. It was a command that demanded absolute silence. "I am a sitting judge on the United States District Court. You are currently holding my son, Cohen Wells. You have precisely 60 seconds to bring him to this counter, or I will have the FBI kick down these doors and arrest every single officer in this building for kidnapping and civil rights violations." Reynolds' mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on dry land. The color drained completely from his face. He looked at the black robe, then at the man's furious eyes, and a terrifying realization hit him like a freight train. Judge Abram Wells. The iron gavel. Judge Wells, Your Honor, Reynolds stammered, his hands shaking as he hovered over his computer keyboard. "I didn't process the arrest, sir. Officers Fisher and Kinsley brought him in. They said, I care exceptionally little about what they said, Abram stated, stepping directly up to the booking counter and leaning over it, his presence swallowing the space. Where is my son? Before Reynolds could hit the intercom, the door to the break room swung open. Officer Talon Fisher strutted out, a styrofoam cup of coffee in his hand, chuckling at a joke Officer David Kinsley had just made behind him. "Hey, Reynolds!" Fisher barked, completely oblivious to the towering figure in black standing at the counter. "Did the punk's daddy show up to pay his tab yet? Tell me the apple doesn't fall far from the trashy tree." Abram turned slowly. He locked eyes with Fisher. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating, and heavy enough to crush bone. Fisher stopped dead in his tracks. The smug grin slid off his face so fast it was almost comical. His eyes darted from Abram's stern, aristocratic face to the unmistakable black judicial robe, and finally to the polished leather shoes. Kinsley, stepping out behind his partner, bumped into Fisher's back, peered over his shoulder, and physically recoiled as if he had been slapped. "Are you the officer who arrested the young man in cell 4? Abram asked, his tone deceptively quiet. Yeah, Fisher managed to choke out, his chest suddenly tightening. He tried to puff himself up, relying on 15 years of street intimidation, but it evaporated under Abram's withering stare. He was driving erratically. Suspected DUI. Resisting. Fascinating. Abram cut him off smoothly. He reached into the pocket of his robe, pulled out a small leather notepad and a gold fountain pen, badge number. "Excuse me," Fisher said, his bravado twitching back to life. "Listen, pal, I don't care what costume you're wearing. Your kid broke the law. Badge number," Abram repeated, stepping away from the counter and walking directly toward Fisher. He stopped mere inches from the veteran cop. "You have detained a minor without notifying his legal guardian. You have subjected a 17-year-old child with no criminal record to an illegal search and seizure, violating his Fourth Amendment rights. You have falsified charges of driving under the influence without administering a breathalyzer, a field sobriety test, or a blood draw. And you have laid hands on my son, leaving contusions on his wrists. Now, give me your badge number, or I will call Chief Robert O'Malley right now and have him suspend you before this coffee gets cold." At the mention of the Chief of Police, Kinsley visibly panicked. "Officer Kinsley, badge 8492. "Sir," the rookie blurted out, his voice cracking. "And Officer Fisher is badge 4421. "Shut up, Dave," Fisher hissed, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson. He glared at Abram. "You think because you're a judge you can intimidate me? Your kid was acting suspicious. I smelled weed. That gives me probable cause to search." "Is that your official statement?" Abram asked, jotting the numbers down with elegant strokes of his pen. "You smelled marijuana?" "Yeah, I did." Abram snapped the notebook shut. "Excellent. That will be very useful when we review the dashcam footage." Speaking of which, Abram turned to Sergeant Reynolds, who was sweating profusely behind the desk. "Sergeant, under authority of the federal bench, I am issuing a verbal preservation order for all dashcam footage from Car 14, all body camera footage from Officers Fisher and Kinsley, and all internal precinct surveillance from the last 2 hours. If a single frame of data goes missing, is corrupted, or is accidentally deleted, I will hold you personally in contempt of federal court. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Crystal clear, Your Honor," Reynolds practically shouted, frantically typing commands into his terminal to lock the files. "Good. Now unlock cell 4. Reynolds scrambled from his stool, grabbing a heavy ring of keys and sprinting down the short hallway. Abram followed closely behind, ignoring the 2 paralyzed arresting officers. When Abram reached the holding cell, his imposing demeanor fractured for just a fraction of a second. Cohen was sitting on the steel bench, shoeless, his suit jacket torn, rubbing his bruised, red wrists. When the teenager looked up and saw his father, his lip trembled. "Dad," Cohen whispered. Abram stepped into the cell the moment the bars slid open. He didn't say a word. He just wrapped his arms around his son, pulling him into a fierce, protective embrace. The black silk of the robe enveloped the shivering boy. For a long moment, the formidable federal judge was just a terrified, infinitely relieved father. "I've got you, Cohen," Abram murmured into his son's hair. "I've got you. It's over." Abram gently pulled back, inspecting the raw, bleeding skin around Cohen's wrists. A fresh wave of fury ignited in the judge's eyes, but he kept his voice soothing for his son. "Let's go home." As father and son walked back into the booking area, Fisher was leaning against the wall, trying to maintain a facade of defiance. Kinsley looked like he was about to vomit. "This isn't over," Fisher sneered, unable to keep his mouth shut. "He still has charges pending. I'm writing the report right now." Abram paused halfway to the door. He turned, placing a protective hand on Cohen's shoulder. "You are absolutely right, Officer Fisher," Abram said, his voice ringing with a chilling finality. "This is far from over. By tomorrow morning, the Department of Justice will open a formal investigation into this precinct's arrest statistics, specifically focusing on racially motivated traffic stops. By tomorrow afternoon, my private attorney will file a federal civil rights lawsuit against you, Officer Kinsley, and the city. And by the end of the month, you will be begging for a plea deal to avoid federal prison. Enjoy your coffee. It's the last one you'll drink with a badge on your chest." Abram pushed the double doors open, guiding Cohen out into the cold night air, leaving a suffocating silence in their wake. The fallout was biblical. Abram Wells did not make empty threats. By 8 a.m. the following morning, Chief of Police Robert O'Malley was standing in Abram's downtown chambers, profusely apologizing and sweating through his uniform. But apologies meant nothing to a father who had seen his son treated like an animal. The twist that truly nailed the coffin shut on Fisher's career didn't even come from the police dashcam, which, conveniently, experienced a glitch regarding its audio recording. It came from Cohen's car. Unbeknownst to Fisher and Kinsley, the hand-me-down Honda Civic was equipped with a dual-facing, motion-activated dash camera that uploaded directly to a secure cloud server. The camera captured everything: the flawless compliance by Cohen, the aggressive hostility of Fisher, the illegal search, the destruction of the debate materials, and the crystal-clear audio of Fisher openly admitting to fabricating the charges just to teach the rich punk a lesson. When the footage was released to the Internal Affairs Division, the investigation exploded. It didn't just stay in Oak Creek, it caught the attention of regional news outlets. The video of the veteran cop violently assaulting an honors student in a thrift store suit, followed by the revelation that the teenager was the son of the state's most prominent federal judge, dominated the headlines for weeks. Officer David Kinsley folded within 24 hours, facing the terrifying wrath of a federal judge and undeniable video evidence. The rookie hired a lawyer and agreed to turn state's witness against his senior partner. Kinsley testified that Fisher routinely fabricated probable cause, targeted minority drivers driving out of low-income neighborhoods, and used excessive force. Kinsley confessed that he had been too terrified of Fisher's influence in the police union to speak up earlier. Because of his cooperation, Kinsley avoided jail time, but the karma was absolute. He was dishonorably discharged from the force, stripped of his certifications, and permanently blacklisted from ever working in law enforcement, security, or public service again. He ended up taking a minimum wage job, working the night shift at a warehouse, entirely stripped of the authority he had so carelessly abused. For Talon Fisher, the hammer of justice swung with devastating, unparalleled force. The police union abandoned him the second the cloud footage went public. The Fraternal Order wanted nothing to do with a man who had practically handed a federal judge the ammunition to audit their entire department. Fisher was immediately suspended without pay, then formally terminated 2 weeks later. But losing his badge was only the beginning. The district attorney, feeling the immense pressure from the federal bench and the public outcry, brought the absolute maximum charges against the disgraced officer. Fisher was indicted for official misconduct, aggravated assault, filing a false police report, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law. During the trial, Fisher sat at the defense table, a shrunken, bitter man. He wore a cheap grey suit, ironically similar to the one Cohen had worn on the night of the arrest. When it was time for victim impact statements, Abram did not speak. He sat in the front row of the gallery, his face an impenetrable mask, watching as his son took the stand. Cohen Wells, holding the confidence of a state regional debate champion, looked directly at the man who had terrified him in the dark. "You didn't see me that night," Cohen told the silent courtroom, his voice steady and echoing clearly off the wood-paneled walls. You saw a stereotype. You saw someone you thought had no voice, no power, and no recourse. You thought you could strip me of my dignity in the dirt on the side of Route 42. But my dignity doesn't come from your permission. And justice doesn't bend to your prejudice. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. The presiding judge sentenced Talon Fisher to 8 years in a federal penitentiary. As the bailiff stepped forward to place the handcuffs on Fisher's wrists, the metal clicking sharply in the quiet courtroom, Fisher finally looked back at the gallery. He looked at Abram Wells. Abram didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply gave a single, slow nod, watching as the man who had humiliated his son was led away in chains, his life in ruins. Karma had not just knocked on Fisher's door, it had kicked it off the hinges. 2 months later, the Oak Creek precinct underwent a massive, federally mandated overhaul. Chief O'Malley took early retirement, and a stringent new protocol was instituted regarding traffic stops, complete with mandatory, unalterable body camera policies. Life for the Wells family slowly returned to normal, but the bond between father and son had forged into something unbreakable. On a warm Tuesday evening, exactly 1 year after the incident, Cohen walked across the stage of his high school auditorium, graduating with honors. As he accepted his diploma, he looked out into the crowd. Sitting in the front row, wearing a tailored suit instead of a black robe, Abram Wells clapped the loudest, his eyes shining with pride. They had faced the darkness of abuse and corruption, and they had won, not just with power, but with the undeniable, blazing light of the truth. If this story of absolute karma and the fierce protection of a father sent chills down your spine, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life stories of justice served, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always comes to light. Leave a comment below. What would you have done if you were in the judge's shoes?
Hi, my name is Board Justice, the owner and manager of Board Justice. After watching the video, 2 cops humiliated a black teen, then his father walked in wearing a judge's robe. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? For me, the strongest feeling was relief that respect and accountability eventually found their way into the situation. What stayed with me most wasn't the surprise of who Cohen's father was, but the reminder that every young person deserves to be treated with fairness, patience, and dignity from the very first moment, regardless of assumptions. I'm curious which part had the biggest impact on you. Was it the traffic stop, the moment Judge Wells walked into the station, or the way the truth finally came to light? And if you had witnessed that encounter, what do you think the officers should have done differently from the start? One lesson I took from this story is that slowing down before making assumptions can completely change the outcome of an interaction. In everyday life, showing respect first often prevents problems that are difficult to undo later.